This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today, Keith Ferrazzi, is the proud owner of a prior New York Times best-selling book, one you perhaps have read or heard about, called Never Eat Alone. And that was all about redefining collaboration inside the workplace, looking at leadership in a whole different way. Today, Keith and I go through his newest book, Leading Without Authority, how the new power of co-elevation can break down silos, transform teams, and reinvent collaboration. And Keith has kind of a big picture, simple way to look at this. We have a choice. We can go farther and farther into our independent, isolated silos where it's just us, or we can commit to going higher together. I really enjoyed this conversation. Keith has a terribly interesting background. I'm not really sure how it happened. I mean, seriously, it is just one crazy ride that he has been on. All of these experiences, all of these insights, all these different people that he's met along the way to pull together some great books, some great insights. He brings the energy. He wants us to improve. But damn it, we need that message. Too many of us are sitting on our you-know-what. Too many of us are trying in the wrong way, or too many of us are not trying. So damn it, I always love to get the energy from a stranger, and Keith is a stranger to me, but to get that energy and to walk away saying, damn it, I learned something. I picked up something new. I walked away with a great transformative insight. Hey, I don't know about you. That's why I do this podcast. That's fun for me. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my conversation with Keith Ferrazzi. Interesting that we start our conversation with you sending me a few text messages asking me about the audience. You kind of looked at my world and you said, okay, this guy's in the investment world. And I am, but I know my audience has become diverse over the years. Let me ask you, though, your thought process, because you talk to a lot of people. You've been on a lot of stages, a lot of boardrooms, a lot of big audiences. What makes you ask that question? What are you thinking? You can go diverse. You can talk to people where they are, but what makes you think that you want to understand that? What's your process I'm getting at?
I have always had a fundamental belief that my job is to be of service. And that sounds really hokey, but hopefully you'll believe it by the time we're done today. When I'm about to get on stage in a large audience, I never sit up in the front row like all the other speakers or VIPs, et cetera, for the event, have their little reserved seats. I stand in the back, I walk around, and I walk down the side of the aisle, and I look at people. And I show up early and I have breakfast with everybody. I need to figure out, how can I be of service? So when I asked you the question, I was trying to figure out, how do I be of greatest service to this group of individuals? I'm an investor myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very focused on being career-minded for the people who need that kind of coaching and feedback. I can go in any number of different ways, as you've suggested. I just want to be of service. And the other thing I want to do is it's a little old schlocky thing as well. I kind of want to fall in love with my audience. I want to really give a damn about my audience before I have a chance to talk with them. In fact, I used to really sweat television. Anytime a camera would be turned on me, I would literally start to sweat, literally. But I mean, I would just get stressed. I don't know why. I could go for hours and hours on stage, literally not a problem, in front of tens of thousands of people in stadiums. Never concerned me at all. But when you turned a camera on me, I froze and panicked. But when I really broke through is when I would imagine whatever that TV show was, Today Show, it would be my sister. I would imagine somebody just like my sister sitting on the other side of that camera. And I would just talk to my sister and try to be of service to my sister. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get myself into the shoes of your listeners so that I can be as much of service as possible.
I've not done anywhere near the number of TV interviews that you've done, but I recall one of the first ones I did with like Fox Business or something. I was driving to Vegas from Southern California, and I had to go to some like warehouse somewhere in Vegas, and it was so antiseptic. You couldn't see anything. You knew you were on live TV, and you're just kind of sitting there sweating. That was my first experience. I was like, oh my God. So I do relate to what you're saying. Let me take you back in time. I want to take you back to early time before we get into a lot of your current content, your newest book, because you've got an interesting background just on the surface for a guy like me to be digging into. I see words like Yale, I see Harvard, Starwood Hotels, youngest marketing chief, 32 years of age. You're not 32 now, nor am I, but this is a really interesting kind of like, if you're just going down the resume line items, you're like, oh, he's pretty successful. He's done all the right things. And some people, I would not be one of these people because there's always more to the story. Some people might instantly say, oh, that sounds like a silver spoon. That guy just had it easy. So what was Keith doing as a 13, 14, 15-year-old guy?
It's a really relevant question. I'll even go back earlier than 13. At 10 years of age, I was sitting at my dad's dinner table, old, grizzled Italian family, immigrant Italian family. My dad was an unemployed steelworker back in the 70s. It was tough to get work. All of the jobs had been shipped overseas. My mom was a cleaning lady, hated it. She didn't want to work. She didn't want to do that work. I had to get a job at the local country club just to bring home $20, which is the same my mom made. So it was meaningful. Sitting at the dinner table, and my dad would commiserate about the fact that he would see stupid things in the company. He was a tow motor operator, he like drove a forklift in a steel plant. And he would see things that he knew were just the wrong way to do things. He'd mention them at home, and it would be very clear to him he had no permission to have a voice in that dialogue. I sat there, and I made a commitment as a young man that I was going to grow up and I was going to make a difference so that families didn't have to suffer like we did. When we were unemployed, there were times when unemployment insurance ran out. The option from the government was welfare cheese, is what it used to be called, this disgusting Velveeta slices things. That was my life. And because of opening doors through relationships that would not normally have been available to me, but because of me being up at the country club, they became available to me, and how I interacted with them on the golf course opened them up even more to me. It taught me a lot, which is all opportunity in your life has to do with not just where you want to go or how you think you want to get there, but who. Who are the people that you engage with? Now, back then, it was who could help you. And that's easy when you're a kid. Spin ahead to today. I've written and I've lived my life in what I call the relational and collaborative sciences. We have a research institute. We invest millions and millions of dollars on critical studies. Back in 2012, we did 20 research studies in conjunction with Harvard Business School on what's the future of virtual work. Well, nobody cared back then. It's kind of important today. We've been researching executive team performance and what are the behaviors of executive teams that yield growth. We can correlate executive team behaviors in a qualitative survey tool against shareholder value and performance outcomes. So from an investor's perspective, it's kind of interesting.
You're either going to hate me or love me for taking you right back to where I had you as that teenager at the country club, because I have a feeling there's something there that needs to be mined a little bit more for my own curiosity, perhaps the audience's curiosity. But you are a guy that's well known as part of your foundation is your understanding of networking. And you were hinting at it with the country club. You were laying a story out of a guy from the other side of the tracks family, and then you get exposed to the country club. I'm guessing, and I'm going to let you run with it, I'm guessing that exposure told you at a very young age, oh, hold on, they still have to put their pants on too, just like me.
The biggest thing that happened back then is, yes, I didn't think I deserved to be there. I wanted to keep my head down and do a good job. But what I found out was that when you serve somebody aggressively, meaning you bust your butt to be the best damn caddy. My dad used to say to me, Keith, show up at the golf course a half an hour early. And I didn't know what the heck he meant. He literally meant show up at the golf course half an hour early, but there was nobody there. Why in the hell would I be walking around the golf course aimlessly waiting for the rest of the caddies to get there at 5 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning? But what I did find is that my showing up at the golf course half an hour early allowed me to see where the pins were placed on the greens. It allowed me to see how the greens were cut. I actually had better information. Plus, needing that job, I humped my butt down that fairway down in that golf course probably more aggressively than most. And there were people who took notice of that and took me under their wing by virtue of their interest in me because of my generosity. And frankly, for most of my golfers, I took a couple strokes off their golf score based on the suggestions of clubs and advanced information I had, et cetera. They started investing in me. And they opened up doors that weren't available to me. I used to be jealous of nepotism. I wish I had been one of those kids born that could hang out at the pool. But I found that I didn't need to be born into those families. If I was of service to people of importance, I could gain access in the same way that their own children did to the networks and the abundance that they lived in. What was great about it is because of just the way I was brought up, I did it all very authentically. It wasn't a manipulation. It wasn't a schlocky thing. It wasn't networky. It was just being a good kid, trying to do a good job like your immigrant father taught you. It ended up with me having an abundance of relationships all my life. And yeah, I mean, I ended up being the youngest partner ever elected at Deloitte, the youngest officer in the Fortune 500, with the same philosophy, which is number one, figure out who are the critical individuals that you want to co-create great things with. Who are the people that you want to partner with in life? And then you serve them and you find ways to make sure that you make their lives better, easier, et cetera. And then you get opportunity. And you got to make sure you capitalize on that opportunity. But it's a pretty simple formula. I taught it in the book, Never Eat Alone. We're talking about networking. You spin ahead today. The reason I wrote my first leadership book is because today we're living in working in networks. To try to get something done in this world, it's really about having a vision and a network of people to fulfill it. There's no way you can fulfill anything that you want to fulfill that has any level of sophistication or ambition or abundance if you're only doing it with your own resources. It's about partnerships.
Let me keep one more question at early Keith for a moment. My thinking is this. So my father's side of the family, early 1900s, they came from Lithuania, Scranton coal mines. Then the next generation were doctors and engineers. What I'm really curious about when you look at your situation where you kind of go off on this path, do you ever ponder the family before you in the sense that you're their genetic material? They could have been there too if they had the opportunity. And I guess where I'm ultimately going is I'd like to mine your thinking a little bit on nurture versus nature, because so many people say, well, gosh, you got to have the right genetic material. But here you are, you're kind of painting a case that it's about nurture.
Well, my dad was an exceptional dude, I have to say. He wasn't educated. And I often wonder why my dad wasn't either an entrepreneur or why he didn't rebound better. I think a lot of it is there are attributes of resilience, there are attributes of agility that even if you're smart, charismatic, concerned, etc., I think the new leadership competencies have shifted a bit. Nonetheless, he did live his life through me, and that was great. I don't think that there's anybody on this planet that can't be exceptional. I have seen so many people come from so many different places to be so extraordinary. CEOs that I work with all the time, and to hear their backstories, everything from abject poverty to abuse. I remember when I had dinner with Donald Trump back when he was just a real estate developer in New York. He was the one that suggested that nobody can be successful without insecurity. I thought that was a very telling comment. I didn't realize that his self-awareness to that was as strong as it was. But what gives that drive? What gives that ambition? I mean, I certainly had it. I didn't think I deserved or belonged anywhere. My dad got me early on into good education, private education. He got me full scholarships, talked his way into getting me full scholarships. And because of that, I was always in a position where I didn't feel I belonged. Now, that has challenged me emotionally over the years because I've always felt that I needed to make up for that, but it lit a fire under my butt that I'm deeply grateful for.
Before we jump into leading with authority, I want to take you to your first big hit, Never Eat Alone. I would love for you to lay some of the groundwork because you have this idea and you're welcome to take the floor and explain the kind of genesis of it. But that must have really changed your life. I mean, that was a big smash.
Oh, you mean Never Eat Alone itself as a book was a big smash?
Yeah. I mean, as a first-time author, your name is over here. It's kind of like, okay, your friends and family know of you. Then you write a book and it sells a lot of copies. And all of a sudden, it changes you in a way.
Well, it gives you choices. I had a big job in a big company. I was at Starwood Hotels, chief marketing officer. I left Starwood because I wanted to run a P&L. I wanted to be an entrepreneur and run something. It was very funny. Nobody ever told you at Harvard that ultimate career growth did not come through functional disciplines. You did not make CEO from CMO. I was CMO and I was very good at sales and marketing, but I wanted to run something. So I came out to the West Coast to work for the famed financier Michael Milken.
I don't have that in my notes. That's an interesting one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I came out to work for Mike and I spent a number of years running one of his companies in his investment portfolio. It was a small computer games company, but that's not why he hired me. He hired me for that, but he hired me because he wanted somebody to fly around with him and be with him when he met with Fortune 500s. He bailed out Chrysler multiple times, actually. Safeway Corporation is a major investor, all these companies. He wanted somebody to be at his right hand who knew the ins and outs of those businesses and could sometimes work with those CEOs, but more importantly, just be his eyes and ears into those companies. That was an amazing number of years. In fact, a lot of that insight is in my book. It's in Never Eat Alone. But I had to decide what I wanted to do. When Never Eat Alone came out, I had a choice. I could stay in the path. I remember there was a time when I flew up to Portland to meet with Phil Knight and interview for the chief marketing officer of Nike. And faced with that job, another large, important corporate job, and in the marketing world, one of the more important jobs you could get, or go on my own. A friend of mine, Tad Smith, who was with me at Starwood, and then ultimately he went on and he was the CEO of Sotheby's, and he's been an amazing executive and a good friend. He said to me, Keith, it's always been in you. Why don't you take your marketing skills and apply it to yourself? Just focus on starting your own firm. And at the time, I wanted to create a company that looked at growth strategies for business, but from the perspective of human capital. I just saw how businesses were so influenced by leaders and teams and the dynamics among them. And I was so puzzled that that wasn't more of a science. There were no diagnostic tools at the time. We didn't have things like employee engagement scores that were correlated to productivity. None of that stuff existed. So I started a firm with a research basis around wanting to crack the code of growth and human behavior in business. We coach executive teams, full stop. We believe that the intervention of how an executive team works is probably the highest likelihood of transforming a business than anything else. There's lots of McKinseys out there working on strategies, lots of Deloitte's and Accentures working on operations and technology. We are the leaders in making sure an executive team functions interdependently. We stay with a company and an executive team for 6 months to a year, and we watch them scrimmage. I'm in the room of their staff meeting. I'm stopping meetings in the middle and calling out conflict avoidance. I am a coach of a team. Like any coach would be of a basketball team, watching the team scrimmage, saying, hey, Jordan, pass the ball. And when Jordan passes the ball, what they realize is they start winning. They thought it was fine for Jordan to score all the scores, but all of a sudden they win when Jordan passes the ball and more people are scoring. A team needs not just to collaborate. It needs to collaborate, but it needs to have a commitment to go higher together, to give each other candid feedback, to challenge each other, to wrestle ideas, to not independently figure things out, but to co-create things with a much bolder set of inputs from inside the business and outside the business. This creates transformation in business, and we have been very successful in helping businesses reach that.
So I'm going to jump back to co-elevation in 1 second, but my audience would kick me in the rear end if I did not ask a follow-up question. to you bringing up Mike Milken. I can recall many years ago reading Predator's Ball. I thoroughly enjoyed understanding how he helped fund so much of America back in the day. Now, of course, a lot of people only know Mike Milken because of the negative Wikipedia entries and the things that happened. Okay, that's what they know. But I have a sneaky suspicion that if the CEOs still alive that were involved with Milken and using his assistance to expand with their new ideas and their new businesses, I have a sneaky suspicion they would say nothing but positives. Can you speak to that also? But then maybe, is there something you want to share, that a big lesson learned or like some key insight that you really took away from your time with him?
I came along quite late in the Mike Milken history. By the way, that man is continuing to write history. It's extraordinary. He's recently bought multiple buildings down in D.C. across from the White House and creating an epicenter for entrepreneurship and capitalism. He's unstoppable. He's extraordinary. Every year, it's one of my honors and blessings to host a dinner for him with a group of men and women who are the next. He knows every CEO today
in the world. Yeah.
The Milken Institute is one of the most extraordinary annual events that exist on the planet. You know, Nobel Prize winners, CEOs, et cetera. But he asks me to introduce him to a group of 35 next generation CEOs, not kids, but the people who are in succession, the ones that are going to be CEOs next. I host that dinner for him every year. And he loves it. He loves it. He loves it. So I'm still very connected and admire him deeply. The thing that I've always remembered him for is something he said to me one time. And I watched him all the time when we go into these meetings. He'd go into a meeting and he'd have a lot of things he needed to talk about. But he would spend so much time trying to understand what's going on with this person, what they're trying to achieve personally. He always led with personal. What was it that mattered to them? And once he understood what mattered to them, he spent as much time worrying about that kid's internship, that CEO's child's internship, that he could pick up the phone and call another CEO and get that kid an internship. Or, God forbid, a dear friend of the CEO or the CEO themselves who might have prostate cancer. And Mike would be on the phone with the most important doctors in the prostate cancer research world helping this person. He leads with generosity. And one of the things he said to me one day was, Keith, the most important thing in building loyalty in life is health, wealth, and children. Health, wealth, and children. If you help another person's health, if you help them build wealth, or you help their children, you have loyalty. I thought that was one of the most powerful lessons I ever learned from Mike.
Very cool. Really interesting experience, huh? Sometimes you must just kind of go, wow, what an interesting path I've been on so far, huh?
There's lots of things I've done that I could just drop the mic and it'd be over, but I'm pretty excited about some of the things I've planned right now.
You brought up co-elevation. You know, the title of the book is Leading Without Authority. But walk me through an example of co-elevation. You showing up at XYZ large corporate outfit, which you've done many times, but walk me through and walk the audience through understanding how you would work and apply some of your new thoughts here.
Yeah, let me do it in two ways that I think could be fun. One of the ways, I'll walk you through a pretty standardized intervention at Corporation XYZ. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that might pique anybody's interest, which is how I've used it in applying my own investment strategy for this particular time today. So I'm going to start with corporate and then I'll move to personal investments. I'll pick a large insurance company. I'm working with a large insurance company today that has had a lot of challenges in innovation. It's been very successful. Its traditional distribution model is agents. These agents still write down their orders on paper, and believe it or not, they fax them. Many of them fax them into a massive call center to place their orders. That's what kind of digital acceleration there is. The group is, you've got your technology group, you have your product group, you have your marketing group, you have your sales group, et cetera. Because they've been doing just fine, they've all been able to live in coexistence. Coexistence is my biggest enemy. And it's what I'm aiming at when I walk into a company, because coexistence is the enemy of transformation. I believe I can wring value out of any business by creating value from the interdependencies. One time I went into Dun & Bradstreet when Bob Kerrigan was the CEO. He's now over at Audible. Bob needed to reinvent the product of the business in a much more integrated fashion than what they had. They had a technology division, they had a data division, They had marketing, etc. But all of them ran their own businesses, similar to this insurance company. And the playbook is basically to awaken them to how much they're eroding shareholder value by not finding value in each other. And so one of the things I will do is every staff meeting has report outs, which I hate. They'll have us report out, and I'll just stop in the middle of the meeting. I'll say, hey, wait a second. Here's what I want you all to do. I want you to huddle. And today, because I now coach all of my teams virtually, I will push a button and break everybody in the executive team down into groups of 2 or 3. And I will send them off with a challenge that says, the person who just gave the report out, number 1, I want you to find something in their report out that you're fearful they might not be aware of that could be a risk. And I want you to bring the risk to their attention because you don't want them to fail. Number 2, I want you to come up with a crazy ass idea that would be an out of the box innovation that of course they're not going to implement, that might spark something clever and innovation with them. And number 3, I want you to earnestly try to find some way that you can come back and offer help. Could be advice, could be resources, could be a best practice, could be an introduction, whatever. I want you to offer help. So everybody goes off in their corners to do this. Now, the person who had just given the report out is not liking me much because he doesn't want all these people in his shorts because he believes that these people are going to come back and tell him what to do. But what I assure him and I assure the team is that when you start to lead without authority, and by the way, it's lead without authority. When you're leading without authority, you're not telling people what to do. You're generously enlisting them in your willingness to make their and your lives significantly better. And I can talk to you about family ways I do this with my kids, I do this in all of my relationships today. Co-elevation has become a North Star. But in these instances, the people go away, they come back. And by the way, the other thing is most of them didn't even listen to the damn report out because most of our teams are sitting there coexisting, not paying any attention until it's our turn to talk. This is horrible. This is not the way we should be running our businesses. This team should believe in each other's success. They should desire to cross the finish line together. They should own a commitment to a shared mission and each other, damn it. They should be willing to challenge. They should be willing to innovate. They should be willing to help. And that's what we coach to. So after you do a couple of these, they all of a sudden come back and they're blown away by the generosity and the value of the input they get from their peers. It's a tipping point. It's a tipping point. And at this insurance company, we literally the other day, I put them through a meeting where I said, listen, you've just gone through one of the most extraordinary transformations the company's ever been through. You went remote in 2 weeks. Now, take that level of transformation that you did in 2 weeks. Tell me what the next one is. And that was the question I sent them off in their rooms to talk about. They came back in 15 minutes. And one of the answers was, let's stay remote. Like literally, let's not go back to headquarters. Let's not go back to headquarters. Let's reduce our overhead by 30%. Let's reduce our real estate by 80%. Let's stay remote. And they've made that commitment. I can't say which one it is. Another of the answer was, let's go fully digital. These folks are still receiving faxes. Let's go fully digital. We're going to radically re-engineer our cost basis going fully digital. We're going to increase the customer speed and service. And they did this in one meeting because they had made a commitment for transformation. They made a commitment for radical adaptability, and they made a commitment to serve each other in co-elevation. Now, it was my job to force them into it. But once they do it, then they've got a taste for the power of it.
Let me share something with you. I think you'll relate for sure, and I think you'll see why I'm bringing it up. It revolves around the word collaboration. I'm in the middle of something unique for me. It's a script writing process, theatrical film, and I've used a lot of outside reviewers for feedback. Many of them will be very stark or not supportive in a way. They'll give good feedback, good stuff that makes sense. But then I have found one person recently, instead of being critical, she'll look at a piece of dialogue and she'll say, maybe you need to think about that more. Maybe you need to take a different look at that. And I've noticed this collaboration thing from her. She's obviously got the confidence in her own station in life to not feel competitive to what I'm doing. And she wants to support what I'm doing. And the differences between those types of people, which is exactly what you're hinting at in your work, is tremendous. And when you feel it, you never want to go back to anything except collaboration.
Because there's so much value to be created. Most organizations focus heavily on strategy. They've got the McKinseys of the world. Most organizations focus on operational efficiencies and technology. They got the Accentures and the Deloittes. But they're not maximizing the effectiveness of the team. The team drives everything. On the flip side, I have worked with more sales organizations and realized this sales organization cannot serve customers as long as the relationship at the C-suite between the head of the solutions business and the head of sales gets fixed, because they have bred not just coexistence, they are in resistance or even resentment. And I've seen shareholder value eroded by personal relationships at the executive team level that weren't strong. Well, there's a whole chapter in my book, the new book, Leading Without Authority, that says, no, you will begin to not just collaborate, but co-elevate. You need to lean in and you need to own each other's success. You need to ratchet up your game. You can't sit there and resent, resist, coexist. You've got to move to squeezing more juice out of this team. When that happens, gosh, I've seen amazing results. The CFO of General Motors back in the day, when I was coaching the team when they were coming out of bankruptcy, the CFO once said to me, Keith, this philosophy is one of the major reasons we didn't go back into bankruptcy. That brought tears to my eyes because my dad was a UAW steelworker. And I said there were a few drop the mic moments in my life. One of them was writing Never Eat Alone. The other one was being told that by General Motors. And today, waking up and GM, I'm back into GM again, and to have that organization rallying around co-elevation as a principle for them going to the next level, or a company like Delta Airlines using it as a earmark for the transformation that it's going through at such a crisis time today.
You don't have to name names, but I'm curious, with the philosophy that you have, the decades under your belt, the types of individuals and corporations that you've been on the inside with, the experiences, the firsthand experiences, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of a complete rejection of you and your philosophy? Anyone that just, and again, I'm not looking for a name, more of a story, a rejection of what you're saying, and they just literally, for whatever reason, and if you know the reason, you can tell me, but for whatever reason, they just weren't going to go where you were going.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of two. One of them was a gentleman running a technology business who I became a very good friend with and have enjoyed his company and like him personally, but to his people, he is a total asshole. The work that I was doing there, I had to point that out and I had to work with him and the team. But at the end of the day, the best I could do was to get the team to co-elevate independent of him. And it worked. I mean, he ultimately got let go by the board. I didn't have anything to do with that, but the team became functional within that very hostile leadership environment.
What do you think causes, I mean, is it deep down, going all the way back to childhood?
Absolutely.
There's nothing really to argue with your work, so it's like, if someone's arguing with it, it's like there's something deep going on.
That helps. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book, Leading Without Authority. I've got a chapter called It's All on You, just talking about how do you deal with assholes? How do you deal with people who don't want to co-elevate with you? This is going to sound wrong, but the example I use is my son. I brought a 12-year-old foster child into our home. He's now 21. But at 12 years old, my boy was obstinate, difficult, angry, violent, avoidant. But my mission that I committed to him, but I committed to myself, I committed to my own faith, that my job was to be his father. And that was a commitment that I wasn't going to shirk. At any point, if I crossed my arms and said, when you behave like my son, I will be your father. I mean, I might have actually said that at one point, who knows? But I certainly had no right to say it and I couldn't behave it. And I had to show up 99.9% of the way until he was ready. Now, you could say, why in the world? That's fine, that's your kid. But why in the world would I do that in the workplace? Well, don't. But if you are committed to your job, then you go 99.9% of the way to fiduciary fulfill your job. And if you're the CEO of the company, or the chief operating officer, the CMO, CFO, whatever you are, I don't give a damn. You deal with difficult people, but you've got a job to do and you're maximizing the shareholder value. I don't give a damn what kind of a jackass you work with. That's not relevant to me. And you have no right to be lazy, indulgent, to dismiss your job because people are difficult around you. That's like saying the competition is tough, so I'm quitting. Screw you. No. I mean, you just don't have that right. And that's the way I've always believed. It's always on you. And so I talk about how do you really work through that. There was another individual who went south on me, and it was because this particular person, who's a CEO, very conflict avoidant, and really, really unnerved this person if we dealt with difficult conversations, probably also coming from a childhood situation. And people talk behind people's backs all the time in companies, in large corporations. I don't allow it. That is stealing from shareholders. If you talk behind each other's backs and you can't bring it into the room, it's like stealing on an expense account. I bring these things into the room and I get them brought in a safe way, but for this particular individual, not safe enough. They wanted to have nothing to do with this kind of transparency and candor.
Sometimes I would hazard a guess that the attitude and the drive and the fortitude to get to the top, to get that company rolling, okay, that's one way. But when you get to the top and you got a lead, you can't keep playing the same way, can you?
There's a dear friend of mine, Marshall Goldsmith, wrote a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. That should be true for all of us. I'm a seeker. I'm always wanting to go to the next level. That's what I've always been. I joke it's because I came from such a low dimension that if I didn't, I would get nowhere. But you always have to be growing and moving and seeking. By the way, let me just go on the investment front. I promised if anybody was thinking about this, and I know we've got 10 minutes or so. Here we are. The coronavirus has crashed the economy worldwide. If we go back in America to after 9/11, there was a lot of money made in 9/11. There was also a lot of money made in the crash of 2008 by a lot of people. And I started asking myself, what portfolio should I have, both from a publicly traded stocks and also on personal investments? How should I be spending my money right now? What's left of it? I certainly took a hit. So I decided to create a co-elevating team around that. I reached out to Peter Diamandis, who's a good friend of mine, one of the great futurists and exponential thinkers in the world. I won't name all the names, but I reached out to a group of folks. And on Sundays, we get together and we talk about what's our investment thesis. And the investment thesis is what businesses right now should be invested in that we feel are ripe for what's next. And it was interesting because I was talking to my financial advisor. My financial advisor kind of didn't want to have anything to do with this conversation because he was of the belief that what you do is you ride the markets up, you ride the markets down, and over the long term, you do fine. But I was like, well, okay, but what about now? Like, this is a unique situation. Where do I go? If I wanted to put X amount of dollars into the marketplace, where do I go right now? And he didn't have a good answer. So we're co-creating that. We're co-elevating as a team. We're challenging each other. We're telling each other we're full of shit. We're pushing each other. We're gathering information. We're supporting each other. We take knocks in our lives and our portfolio. We're there for each other. We're sharing. It's just this amazing bonded group of brothers and sisters taking a hill together around financial investments. Is that something everybody thinks about? Well, it's easy for me because if you live your life with the philosophy of co-elevation, and I led this. I didn't have any authority over this group of individuals. I created this community. Hopefully, we'll see how we do.
It's a nice, simple, straightforward idea that anybody can implement.
Amen. Exactly.
In our few minutes we have left, let me keep it at COVID, Corona time and remote work, at least in the short term. And you've already talked a little bit about remote work examples and some of your experiences. But let's keep it at remote work for a second. I always thought when I watched Netscape go public in 1995, I put up a website in 1996. I was in the Northern Virginia area, 15 miles outside Washington, D.C., and I said to myself, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's going to be remote work now. The internet's here. That never happened. Do you think something like Corona or COVID will potentially flip the switch?
Yes. I was just on a call with a CEO right before this, explaining to him, you've got to engineer going back to work, if you want to call it that, to assume that there are radically new ways of working and we don't slip back into the old ways. And how do we spending our time doing that? So many of these CEOs and CHROs and COOs, they're just so busy under crisis dealing with the crap right now that they don't have time to do the go forward piece right. And so I wanted to help shortcut that for them. Very excited about that, actually. And I'm seeing extraordinary work done remotely. And I don't think we need to go back. I really don't.
I would think that one of the reasons that your perspective will probably win out I would think it's my perspective too, is that when you take this mass experiment of locking people down and they have no choice other than to live their life remotely on everything, it forces people that maybe were a little slow to catch on to all of a sudden go, oh, maybe this is not perfect, but it's got some advantages over the old ways.
Yeah, I don't know what part of the world your rules are there, but most of the folks over here are not that excited about getting back into the commute, and certainly not excited about rushing back to an office where we're going to sit 6 feet away from each other with masks all day. That's ridiculous. What I find is in densely populated cities where housing is small, younger population may have roommates, et cetera. There may be some exceptions to this, but I feel that we've got to start taking a zero-based perspective, zero-based budgeting perspective, in a sense, on remote. Don't ask the question, what do we still keep remote? Ask the question, assume we're 100% remote. What do we have to go back to co-located? And I think that's a better way, an interesting way to do it. And I'm using the philosophy of leading without authority and co-elevation to crack the code of that answer. Co-elevation is the way you crack the code of answers, because it's only going to be with co-creating a solution with other people that you'll really get the answer as best as it can be. You as an individual will never come up with as good an answer as an insightful collective arguing and wrestling a set of ideas. It's not consensus, it's bold, but it's radical inputs give radical transformation and radical adaptability, because you got to keep getting those inputs constantly coming.
A final thought as you lay that scenario out, as you go back to your investment panel that you guys have put together, your co-elevation panel, if what you're saying ends up being the path, the direction, it sure sounds like we are not going to want to invest in commercial office space.
I am concerned about that. I've got some clients who are in the commercial real estate business. I think there's a lot of co-creation that needs to occur to figure out what they're going to do.
I've always thought that a lot of those buildings honestly will become condos. I've been thinking this for over a decade, that's the natural direction, is to retrofit these buildings for a living.
I think that's the standard belief. I agree. But we'll see. We still haven't figured out what to do with malls.
Yeah, that's a whole different one.
A friend of mine said something the other day I thought was great. Anything with an escalator is dead.
We're taking people straight to the depressing side of Corona really quick.
Well, listen, I'm so grateful for this time. Thank you. Your audience, I really hope that we've been able to navigate some particular insights and interests. I'm excited to give them this operating system. But again, I want to reinforce one thing. Co-elevation is, yes, a way that you could boost your career. Co-elevation is a way that as an entrepreneur, you could redefine the culture of your company. It allows you to create transformational outcomes inside of a company. But damn it, it's the way to live your life. Living your life in creation with other people to go higher together. I am seeing around the world a lot of that right now. Medical communities coming together to solve problems that they would have never shared information, but look at what they're doing now globally around the coronavirus. But then I'm also seeing sadness in governments, more schismatic and more isolated and siloed than ever before. I don't know that it's healthy. I don't think any of us think that it's healthy. And so if any of you as individuals start adopting co-elevation, you could light the fire that maybe conflates over time. And that this to me is not just a practice for success, but it's a movement. I think we need to start moving more toward a sense of going higher together as a collectivism that wins as a group. And I know that it works. It's been working in business for many years for me. It's working even better today in this crisis. So I hope it works for you.
The book, Leading Without Authority, How the New Power of Co-Elevation Can Break Down Silos, Transform Teams, and Reinvent Collaboration. Keith, I appreciate the time today. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the whole time I was talking to you, I kept thinking to myself, if I had about 3 to 4 hours to really dig deep on this guy, I can really pull out a lot of stuff. So if you ever want somebody to really, really dig deep and put you out and fillet you out on the grill, let everybody understand every last bit, I think I could pull it out of you.
That would be intriguing to me. I have often thought that at some point it would be egotistical. I'm 53, I'm not a young man, but it would be egotistical to think that my life story is interesting to anybody. But I would really be intrigued to have that. I'd love to have that kind of an interview, pulling that kind of stuff out, even just to record it for that sake. I'd take you up on it. I'd be intrigued.
The hard part is this, is like when you come on a show like this, and I'll be the same way, when I'm talking and I want to let people know about my new book or whatnot, we want to get the message out. But then on the flip side, and I've seen you write about this, people inherently first want to know, what's the story of Keith? Give me the nitty gritty. How does he put his pants on? How does he walk and talk? They want to know all that stuff. And if they love that stuff, heck, they're going out and buying the book tomorrow.
Yeah, good point.
What's the website we can send people to, Keith?
I think the best thing is ferrazzilearning.com. That's where all of our resource information exists, ferrazzilearning.com.
Great stuff. I appreciate it.
Michael, thank you.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.